To get started here, I'm going to click go live. Let me know if you can hear me and that everything's going okay. I'll give you a little bit of context on what's going on right now. As many of you may know, Bill C30 is trying to make its way through the House of Commons, and they're running out of time before Parliament dissolves for the summer. And as of just this morning, there was an announcement that there was going to be a press conference with both Freeland, the Finance Minister of Canada, as well as Pablo Rodriguez, who is the Liberals House leader in the House of Commons. So essentially, he sort of comments on the day-to-day and what's happening in the House of Commons. Now, likely because these two people are included on a press conference, it's going to be likely about how the Liberals believe the Conservatives are deliberately blocking legislation from passing through. We talked about this in the video that I believe I released on Saturday. Or maybe on Friday, but we talked about how the Liberals believe that the Conservatives are just intentionally trying to stall Parliament so that they can't pass Bill C30, and the Conservatives are saying, well, the Liberals are doing the same thing to them in the committees. So it's a big fight that's going on right now in the House of Commons, and this press conference has already started, so we're going to be able to skip through the French parts that I don't personally understand. Apologies to my French friends out there, but we're going to get into this. It's currently live now, and we're going to try to catch up to where it is. So without further ado, let's hop right in and I'll provide my analysis for you guys. Let's get over here. This is Pablo Rodriguez, again, the House leader for the Liberals, and we're going to see what they have to say and if they have any strong words. Yeah, so let's see what's up.
This conference is being recorded. Cette conférence est en...
Turn to the government House leader.
Bonjour, ma chère Christelle, très content de te voir. Salut, 8 jours. Et comme je l'ai dit la semaine, parce que c'est là qu'on va travailler. Il est à peu près, et les Canadiens, c'est 30, c'est la mise en œuvre du budget. Les conservateurs, ils s'opposent à ces aujourd'hui que ça part. Et c'est exactement l'idée du parti policies.
Okay, that sounds like
holding
English.
Parliament hostage. Et c'est votre choix. Ou vous pouvez travailler avec nous pour qu'on s'assure que les députés aient la chance de voter sur des projets de loi progressistes qui vont aider des millions de Canadiens. Alors, je vous exhorte, je vous en prie de faire ce qu'il faut. So, we're here because Erin O'Toole's Conservatives are holding Parliament hostage. There are only 8 days left before the House rises. And if you include the opposition days that are left, there are 2. There are only, in reality, 6 days left to debate and pass government legislation. So for those in the House who believe in progressive policies, now is the time to come together. Now is the time to put aside partisanship. And as I said last week, the problem we have in this minority parliament is that one of the parties don't believe in collaboration. They don't want to have anything to do with collaboration. Erin O'Toole's Conservatives, they don't believe in parliament. They only believe in one thing, political obstruction. And you've seen this over and over again, they have obstructed the will of the majority of the House. They're using their minority to block the will of the majority. And last week, remember, on Thursday, I warned Canadian that this was what our politics had to come to in the House. This is what's happening in the House as we speak. And remarkably, within a minute of that, as I was finishing the press conference, the Conservative, they illustrated my point. They moved the motion to shut down the House for the day. It was probably around 10 a.m. They said, okay, it's 10 a.m. We've worked enough. Let's go home. While workers across Canada had barely begun their workday, Conservatives, they already wanted to go home. So we voted, of course, against that motion. So did the other parties. The Conservatives lost that vote, and Canadians won. But they didn't give up. The Conservatives, no. They hijacked the work of the House with endless speeches to block Parliament's agenda. Why? Because we've put forward a motion to have the House sit longer hours into the evening. We're asking for more hours to debate and pass important legislation. This is what we're pushing for, and Conservatives don't want it. On behalf of Canadians, we want to pass 4 bills. We're not asking for 10 or 20, no, only 4 that are extremely important. C30, to implement the budget. C12, the legislation to achieve ambitious but necessary targets to stop climate change. C10, to support our cultural sector. And C6, to ban the cruel practice of conversion therapy. Conservatives, they oppose those bills, right? But they're just a minority in the House. So they use all the political games they can find to prevent the House from advancing these priorities. They're really determined to block our progressive agenda at every step. I've always said it. I want to work with everyone in this House, and we've done it in the past more than once. We've worked together, and we passed much needed bills in the pandemic to help Canadians, to help businesses, to help families. And this is a minority parliament. That means we share a responsibility to work together. Of course, the government has its own responsibility, but the other parties have that responsibility also. You know, constructive debate is good. It's good. It could be very fun too, also, and it could be very productive. But pure partisan obstruction in the House is not good for democracy. It is cynical and it is toxic. And unfortunately, that's what we've been seeing from the Conservatives. And you know what? Canadians are looking at us, and they take this very seriously, because it's really important. And Canadians expect better from us, from all of us. So this is why our government has given notice that on all four of our priority bills, including the Budget Implementation Act, and we will propose measures to ensure that the debate is completed. The bills must come to a vote. So what I say to my colleagues from the Bloc, the NDP, the Green Party, you can stand by and do nothing while the Conservative obstruct the House. You can turn a blind eye to all of it, or and this is your decision to make, or you can work with us to ensure members of Parliament are given the chance to vote on progressive legislation that would help millions of Canadians. And I'm urging you to do the right thing. Now, I'd like to turn to Minister Freeland, who would like to say a few words as well.
Okay, so we're going to get to Chrystia Freeland here in just a moment and see what she has to say on this, but big allegations here coming from Pablo Rodriguez, who is the House Minister, or the House Leader in the House of Commons for the Liberals. Essentially, the Liberals are saying the Conservatives, they're holding everything up. They're not letting us pass the legislation we want to pass before Parliament dissolves on June 23rd. Now, if you watched my video from a little while ago, you'll know that the government is essentially, in the House of Commons at least, taking a big break throughout the summer as of June 23rd, and if they don't pass the legislation that they're trying to pass, these four priority bills, Bill C30, the Budget Implementation Act, Bill C12, the one that's supposed to implement their environmental changes and their targets, Bill C10, one that's very controversial, that is about regulating the internet in terms of content production, kind of giving power to the CRTC to regulate that in certain ways, as well as C6 on oh my goodness, I can't speak today. On conversion therapy. Those are the four main priority bills that the Liberals are trying to get passed before that deadline. And Pablo Rodriguez here is saying, hey, the Conservatives, they don't have power, but they're taking power by filibustering and trying to make this whole thing take a long amount of time to get passed so that it won't pass in time for the deadline here. So some pretty big allegations. You have to remember, these are the Liberals saying this, and of course they're going to be biased in terms of the Liberals. I like to try to stay right down in the middle on this channel, but let's see hear what Chrystia Freeland has to say about all this.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
OK. Merci beaucoup, Pablo. Et bon matin à tous. Et je suis complètement d'accord avec Pablo que c'est l'exécution du budget, measures for Canadians, dont ils ont grandement besoin. I'm here today because I am deeply concerned that the critical support measures for Canadians contained within the budget bill are falling victim to opposition delay tactics, which the government House Leader has just outlined. Allow me to remind you of some of the concrete measures at stake in this budget legislation. Bill C30 includes key measures that would, first, extend the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy, and lockdown support until September 25th, 2021. These measures expire this month unless Parliament approves the extension. Second, the extension of important income support for Canadians, such as the Canada Recovery Benefit and the Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit. Third, establish the new Canada Recovery Hiring Program, which will help businesses with the costs of hiring new workers as our economy reopens. 4. Bonifier les prestations de la sécurité de l'AVS pour les personnes âgées de 75 ans ou plus, afin de leur offrir une meilleure sécurité financière à un moment de la vie où ils risquent d'épuiser leurs économies. 5. Bonifier l'allocation canadienne pour les travailleurs afin d'offrir plus d'argent aux Canadiens à faible revenu, ce qui permettra d'aider environ 1 million de Canadiens de plus et de sortir près de 100 000 personnes de la pauvreté. 6. Prolonger les prestations de maladie de l'assurance-emploi pour les faire passer de 15 à 26 semaines. 7. Établir un salaire minimum fédéral de 15 $. 8. Prolonger la dispense d'intérêt.
So right now she's going over, and I think she's going to do this in English in a moment, all the things that are inside of Bill C30 that won't happen if it doesn't get passed. They're really trying to frame this in a way that that it forces the NDP and the Bloc to go along with passing the legislation, because if they don't, the Liberals then will say, hey, these are the parties that made it so that these very critical bills didn't pass, even though these parties sort of pushed against portions of this bill to try to make them better in their eyes.
Exerciser sur le système de soins de santé et 1 milliard de qualité.
Is she going to do that in English?
Can you hear me?
There we go.
No, Am I back now?
We lost you for a little bit.
Okay, did you lose me at point 10, Pablo? Okay. And let me just say sorry to the press corps. I am here in quarantine in my attic, and so tech support is myself. Okay, Pablo, I'm counting on you to smile if you can hear me. Okay, alors 10. Fournir deux
okay, let's see if she does this in English.
From the COVID.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Renommer le Bill C30 is a pragmatic, ambitious, responsible plan to help all Canadians and to give Canadians and Canadian businesses the support they need to come roaring back from the COVID pandemic. Unfortunately, the Conservative Party is exploiting parliamentary tactics to deny Canadians this essential support. Members of Parliament from all parties in this House have debated this legislation for a combined 22 hours, hearing from more than 160 speakers. The House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance has studied the bill exhaustively for more than 40 hours, hearing from 132 witnesses. I have appeared before the committee to address members' questions. In the case of Bill C-14, the Economic Statement Implementation Act, which implemented the Fall Economic Statement, the Conservative Party delayed urgent support programs for months. There were real-world consequences. Payments to Canadian families of the Canada Child Benefit top-up were delayed for nearly 6 months. That caused a lot of hardship for millions of Canadians. Today, the government will move a motion for time allocation on Bill C-30. We have been left with no choice. Conservative Party delay tactics mean that core support programs for Canadian workers and small businesses will expire this month, just as we are all working so hard to reopen the economy. That is completely unacceptable. Canadians have sacrificed too much to be confronted with this additional, needless obstacle. Without parliamentary approval of the Budget Implementation Act, the wage subsidy, which has supported 5.3 million jobs, will expire this month. Without parliamentary approval of the Budget Implementation Act, the rent subsidy, which has supported 190,000 businesses, will expire this month. Without parliamentary approval of the Budget Implementation Act, the Canada Recovery Benefit, which has supported 2 million Canadians during the pandemic, will no longer be there for people who need it most. That is why we are calling on the other parties in the House of Commons to use the parliamentary tools at our disposal, including time allocation, to get these supports to Canadians. This bill has been debated in the House. It has been studied at committee. It is now time to call the question. It is time to put aside the theatrics and to lay out, once and for all, where we all stand on these issues. Our government has said since the beginning of this pandemic that we would do whatever it takes to support Canadians, and we will keep that promise. We will not stand idly by as opposition parties seek to create additional hardship for Canadians who have already sacrificed so much. We're now happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Et Monsieur le
Wow, so a lot of big statements. We're going to get into those questions, but before we get into the questions, I'm going to sort of summarize what all of this means. If you're just joining the stream, we didn't expect this press conference to happen today, but we got this surprise announcement from Chrystia Freeland and Pablo Rodriguez saying, hey, we're going to hold this, and it seems like they're really putting the pressure on the Conservatives right now. Essentially what they're saying is, hey, we have these very important bills in the Liberals' eyes that we need to get passed. Bill C30, Bill C12, Bill C10, and Bill C6. Bill C30 is the one that most people on my channel have been following. That's the Budget Implementation Act, seeking to extend the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the CRB, the CRCB, among many other supports. And the Liberals are saying, hey, the Conservatives, they're exploiting parliamentary tactics. So essentially taking advantage of these systems and the way that the House of Commons works in order to make it so that these bills aren't able to pass by the deadline of June 23rd, when Parliament will dissolve and take its summer vacation, essentially. So I think what the Liberals are doing here is holding this press conference to not only put pressure on the Conservatives to stop delaying in the Liberals' eyes. Again, I'm not saying that the Conservatives are truly doing this, but this is certainly what the Liberals are accusing them of. And also put pressure on the NDP and Jagmeet Singh in the Bloc Québécois so that they will vote with the Liberals to pass this legislation. Now, it gets a little bit controversial when we consider what's happened in the committee phase, where the NDP and the Bloc Québécois tried to make changes to some of these bills, but the Liberals, through some loopholes in the Finance Committee, said, hey, your amendments that you tried to make, the changes that you tried to make in order to make in the NDP and the Bloc Québec eyes, in order to make the Bill C30 better, they sort of blocked those amendments and didn't allow them to happen. So there's a little bit of doublespeak on both sides. I think everyone is to blame a little bit about this, but here are the stakes. If this bill, Bill C30, doesn't pass by June 23rd, which is what Chrystia Freeland just said she's extremely worried may happen, well, if that doesn't happen, well then benefits like the CRB, the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy, Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the Canada Recovery Caregivers Benefit, well, they would, for many people who have been applying since the beginning, expire. And that could be a big issue. Now, the Liberals seem to think that the Conservatives are doing this to try to make a crisis ahead of an election to make the Liberals look bad. Certainly the Conservatives don't think that's what they're doing. They say that they're providing sort of critical analysis on these bills and want to take the time to actually make sure it's all good. And this is what they said with Bill C14 back in the day too. But I'll get into more analysis here in a moment. But let's hear what the reporters have to say on these questions to Chrystia Freeland, because I think there's going to be some good ones here. Let's flip over.
Le Ministre, we will now turn to the phone for questions. It'll be one question, one follow-up, une question et une question en suivi. Opérateur?
Merci, thank you. Please press star 1 at this time to ask a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur l'étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. La première question, the first question is from Jordan Press of the Canadian Press. Your line is open. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for your time. My first question is just going to ask if you'd be willing to sit through the summer at all, similar to what you did last year, from that passing some of this important legislation you say needs to be passed immediately.
If we're always ready to work, but even if we sit all summer, if the Conservatives keep blocking and obstruction, it's not going to change anything. They have to stop.
And I'd just like to add, Pablo, if I may, is that okay? I am speaking today as finance minister, and I am here because I absolutely support the message that Pablo delivered last week, that now is the time to sound the alarm. As I outlined in my remarks, Canadians need the support measures in the budget right now. I'd like to remind people of the gravity of the situation. We have just gone through a global pandemic. Our economy has suffered the deepest recession since the Great Depression. Thanks to Canadians being so amazing and really stepping up to get vaccinated and demonstrating remarkable discipline and resilience during the pandemic and during the lockdowns, our country is now poised to come roaring back. Across the country, the economy is reopening. But our government absolutely believes that the business and income support measures currently in place need to be extended to the end of September. These measures run out this month. And I strongly believe Canadians need that support. So it really is time to end the partisan games. It is time to end the theatrics. It is time for all MPs to get to work. And speaking as finance minister, let me just say, to pass the budget.
And as my follow-up, Deputy Prime Minister, as the finance minister, do you foresee, given what you have seen with some of the economic indicators, do you foresee a need to be consulting with the opposition parties over the summer, depending on how things go, that you may need to reshape some of that aid, as you talk about, is so needed right now?
We consult with the opposition parties often. I've spoken with all of them as the budget legislation has advanced. In fact, I had a conversation over the weekend, as I know Pablo did. Our measures include some levers which would allow the government the possibility of adjusting the supports if needed. I do want to say, though, that I believe the plan we have in place, which we proposed on April 19th when we delivered the budget, for continuing the measures through to the end of September, and then putting in a new transition measure, the hiring credit. When I look at both the situation with vaccines and with the level of contagion, as well as the economic indicators, right now, today, I'm really comfortable with the measures we have in place and the plan we have in place.
Merci. Prochaine question.
Merci. Thank you. The next question, la question suivante, est de Raymond Filion de TVA. La parole est à vous.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour à tous. Question pour M. Rodriguez. Dans la mesure où les sondages démontrent actuellement que si des élections avaient lieu maintenant, on se retrouverait avec pas mal la même distribution des sièges aux communes que présentement, à savoir que vous seriez encore minoritaire, les conservateurs.
Okay, again, sorry to my French friends here, but I'm not the most bilingual, so we're going to skip through the French part. Wow, some big comments here. Lots of implications for anybody who's receiving a benefit. We're going to get into more analysis on this too after we get into these questions.
Au blocage des au parti enlève le budget. Alors, si on n'a pas ces 30...
Le budget des Canadiens donné ses députés.
And is the fact that this is...
Okay, here's a new question.
Budget implementation.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my questions. I'm wondering if you can tell me what specifically is the holdup around the budget implementation bill, and is the fact that this is a confidence motion also a reason the government hasn't passed the bill yet or tried to?
Well, the government has already the confidence of the House on the budget, but the Conservatives are stalling the time that we have in the House. So what we want to call a bill if you look at what's happening these days, they find one way or another to make us waste our time. On Thursday, they decided that they wanted to shut down the House. So they're starting all the process on that, and we had to vote on that. That takes a lot of time. Then they refused, and they filibustered, they refused to extend the hours that we need to debate those important bills. And third, they're starting filibustering last week again, and speaking for hours. We need those hours to finish the debate and vote on the bills. Parliament ends next Wednesday, the 23rd. We have 6 days to debate those bills, including those 4 important bills, and including the budget that contains everything that the Minister of Finance has said. So I'm calling the Conservatives to stop doing that, and friends from the other progressive parties help us pass this very important legislation.
And as a follow-up, I'm wondering if you can explain why it's so important to pass these 4 bills right now, given that, you know, the House, when it comes back in September, if there's no election, as you say, you don't want one, you could pick up and resume then. So why is it important to pass these 4 bills right now before the summer? And is it not possible just to prioritize the budget implementation bill, which, as you mentioned, has a number of programs that are set to expire within the next few weeks?
Well, the budget speaks for itself, and maybe Christian can add on that, but we need, if no budget bill, no extension of the programs, Canadians lose. The other bills, take the cultural sector. They're losing millions every month. What we're asking is for the web giants to contribute to our artists that were hit harder than anyone else by the pandemic. So C10 is absolutely essential. C12, we're talking about the environment. We're talking about the planet. You can see already the impact it has. We've seen it for years, the impact that climate change is having on our planet. So are we going to wait and waste more time? No, we have to adapt that now. We owe it to our children. And conversion therapy. Seriously, we really want to keep on having those programs that are hurted and keep hurting so many people from the LGBTQ community, especially young people. So theoretically, we could say, you know what, it's true. We're coming back in September, so let's forget everything and we'll debate it on summer, and we're going to go home this summer and have a nice summer and relax. Or we can say, let's do the important things now. And this is what we're asking.
Merci. Prochaine question.
Okay, so I've been seeing a couple people asking for a recap here on what's going on. Let me provide a very, very pared down small recap here so you can get the context of what these reporters are asking questions about. The Liberals are coming out and saying the Conservatives are stalling the House of Commons so that the Liberals can't pass the 4 important bills, in their eyes, that they want to get passed, including the Budget Implementation Act. If the Budget Implementation Act doesn't get passed before June 23rd, when the House of Commons dissolves or rises, well then many benefits would expire for people who have been applying since the beginning, and the House of Commons isn't set to sit again until September, so there could be a period of 2 months where people aren't able to receive any benefits. We're having reporters ask some very interesting questions as to why are you trying to push through these other bills, the 3 other ones, when you're just going to come back in September and you're going to be able to pass them then. How come you're not prioritizing Bill C30? And there was a little bit of an answer there from Pablo Rodriguez, but it seems like they're being also a little opportunistic that there's this deadline of June 23rd trying to get these bills passed without potentially the extensive debate that would happen if there wasn't this deadline. So some interesting takes on both sides here. Again, I'm staying right down the middle here. Let's listen in on some more of these questions and we'll provide more analysis after the fact.
Thank you, merci. La prochaine question. The next question is from Amanda Connolly of Global News. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Good morning. My question is for the Deputy Prime Minister. Minister Freeland, you've offered an apology before to women who have been or experienced harassment in the Canadian military. So I'd like to ask you now, do you believe it was appropriate for the head of the Navy and the Vice Chief of the Defense Staff to go golfing with General Jonathan Vance while he remains under military police investigation? And do you believe, given what we've seen here, that senior leaders in the Canadian military really do believe that they are untouchable?
Thank you for the question, Amanda. I learned about this over the weekend, as did the rest of our government. I was very disappointed, very surprised. I think this showed very poor judgment. And I absolutely understand. And
this is another topic. I'm going to skip through this a little bit just so we can get to the stuff about Bill C30 and the budget and the things that we've been covering here on the channel. Of course, the allegations against the General Vance here, another big story in Canada right now.
Which we're talking about today, which we want to have passed to fund further work on the creation of a system to protect and support the Canadian women of the armed forces against sexual harassment.
And to follow up on that, are you concerned that the military's insistence that it can credibly investigate sexual misconduct, the old boys
in the Canadian Armed Forces?
Asked this morning about his party's past policies opposing M103, the barbaric cultural practices line, things like that. He said that all parties need to do better responding to Islamophobia. I'd like to get your response to that. Do you think that some parties have more to reflect upon when it comes to fighting Islamophobia, or do you think that all parties need to do better?
Again, an important topic. I'm not diminishing that, but we're trying to get to the stuff that's all about this bill, this budget, the things that we've been covering here on the channel. So no disrespect to that information as well, but we're going to skip forward.
Of course, hindsight, we are
Parliament right now. You said the Conservatives don't believe in Parliament. They all they believe in is instruction. I'm just wondering, and I know, I think I might know what your answer is, but are you saying here it's time for an election? Is that what you're saying in making comments like that?
No, we don't want an election. We want legislation. But we have to send this strong message to all parliamentarians, on one side to the Conservatives, and telling them it's time you guys stop now. Because we have all shared this responsibility in a minority government. Of course, the government has its responsibility, but others have it too, because of the minority context. So if we want bills to pass for the benefit of all Canadians, for our workers, for our families, for small businesses, we have to collaborate. And definitely not jam Parliament. And the Conservatives are jamming that Parliament, actually. As I said it on Thursday, you saw it. They want to shut down Parliament. It was about 10:30 in the morning. They did introduce a motion that we had to vote on to shut down Parliament. How serious is that? And then they filibuster, and they refuse to extend hours. Come on. They refuse to extend hours. Like, we can't work later. They don't want to work at night. They're tired. I don't know what it is. But we should extend those hours. We need those hours to pass those important bills. So that's my message to the Conservatives. And to the other progressive parties, I'm saying, guys, let's work together on these progressive bills to help Canadians from coast to coast to coast. So we're not talking about election on our side, that's for sure. And again, as I said, we don't want an election, we want legislation.
And if I could just add, Pablo, ça va? Je peux ajouter? So just to add, speaking as finance minister, I am here with Pablo today to really underscore for Canadians the seriousness of the situation, the gravity of the situation. It's the 14th of June. We have not yet passed the budget. And this is no ordinary budget. This is the budget that Canadians need to finish the fight against COVID and to come roaring back from the COVID recession. The wage subsidy, the rent subsidy, the lockdown support, these all expire this month. The budget extends them to the 25th of September. Canadians need that extra support to come roaring back. the CRB, the income support measures, which have been so essential throughout COVID. Canadians need those extended as well as this budget does to finish the work of fighting COVID and to come roaring back. So this is, I really just want to remind people, we are just at the end of a global pandemic. Our government has a plan to get Canadians through, to punch our way out of the COVID recession. Canadians deserve this support. People have been so great. They have been so resilient. They have sacrificed so much, and they need the measures in the budget to finally finish this fight. We have debated these measures exhaustively. All that we are saying is let these measures come to a vote. This is really serious. We need to do this now. We have to stop the delay.
Thank you. On va prendre une dernière question. We will take one last question. Thank you.
Merci. Thank you. Notre dernière question, the last question, is from Cormac McSweeney of CT News. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I know you say you don't want an election, but you're focusing heavily on the roadblocks that you're facing within Parliament. So is it your opinion then that Parliament is still functional at this time? And although you don't want an election, is an election reluctantly on the table if you can't get key pieces of legislation like the budget bill passed in a timely manner?
Well, I will remind you that in a minority parliament, an election can happen in time. There can be a mistake. Remember Joe Clark when he counted his whip made a mistake when he counted the MPs that were present at that moment. The opposition may decide that they want they want to go and vote against us. But on our side, we've been very clear, and that's why we're pushing so hard for those bills. I mean, we've been working extremely seriously, professionally, with all our hearts to help Canadians. We were able to negotiate with all parties to make sure that all those important programs were in place. We were an example to the world in the way we were able to deliver those programs to Canadians. Now, for some reason, the Conservatives turned around and they said, no, you know what? I don't believe in collaboration anymore. I just want to block everything. So they've been doing that. They keep doing that. And it has to stop. And as for the other parties, I mean, do they believe in what's in the budget? I'm sure they do. So support us. Should we stop conversion therapy? I'm sure the other parties agree. Should we do more for the environment? I'm sure the other parties agree. Should we do more for our culture? I'm also sure that the other parties agree. But that has to translate in concrete action and votes. So this is what we're asking from the other party, especially for the budget, because it contains so many good measures that the Deputy Prime Minister explained.
Okay, and I'm still hoping for some clarity. Do you think Parliament is still functional at this time? But on a separate question for the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, domestic terror charges have now officially been laid against the suspect in the horrific London attack. And I'm just wondering if I could get your reaction to the fact that these domestic terror charges have now been laid, but also when it comes to this national summit on Islamophobia that all parties have agreed to, and to call on the government to try and organize such an event in collaboration with Muslim communities. Is the federal government willing to bring new money to the table in order to try and combat Islamophobia in Canada?
So thank you for the question. And, again, on the terrorist attack in London, I think it is really important for us to name it as an act of terror. It is important for us to identify this as an act of Islamophobia, and it is important for us to identify the terrible threat that white supremacism poses to Canada and to Canadians. It's important for the courts and the judicial process.
Again, I don't want to minimize the importance and severity of the topic she's talking about here. Definitely something that needs to be talked about. But since we're covering on this channel Bill C30 and the benefits and supports and the budget passing, we're going to see if there's anything else in this press conference. And then I'm going to do a quick summary on what's going on.
And our way out of the COVID recession. But Cormac, we can't do it alone. The reality is we are a minority in Parliament, and we're a parliamentary democracy. So we need Parliament to pass laws to do this important work of supporting Canadians, of finishing the fight against COVID, and of coming roaring back from the COVID recession. And Pablo and I are here today to call on the other parties in the House to end the theatrics, to look at the calendar, to see it's the 14th of June, and to understand that we all have a duty and a responsibility to Canadians and to our constituents to roll up our sleeves, to get to work, and as the finance minister, let me just say, to pass the budget. Now, I am constitutionally an optimist. I believe in the better angels of our nature. And I believe that fundamentally, Canada works. And so I believe that people are going to shake their heads this week, roll up their sleeves, get to work, and pass the budget and pass these other pieces of progressive, really important legislation. But I think that it's important for Canadians to understand the seriousness, the gravity of this moment, and for Canadians to be sure that their elected representatives understand the seriousness of this moment. I really believe that Canadians don't want an election right now. I believe that Canadians know how essential these government support programs are. I believe Canadians really, really want to finish the fight against COVID and to have a strong recovery from the COVID recession. Canadians want to have a great summer of reopening. And Pablo and I are here to just explain to Canadians that to have that great summer of reopening, we believe that Canadians and Canadian businesses need the additional support that the budget will provide. They need that support to be extended through to the end of September. And so we're just saying today, we think that support is necessary. We have laid out a clear, very, very specific plan, which has been debated for hours and hours and hours in the House and at committee. Now is the time to end delaying tactics. Now is the time to vote on that economic plan on the budget and to be sure that Canadians continue to have the support that they need.
Okay, so it looks like that's the end of the press conference there. So let's provide a little bit of a summary here as to what went down, and then I'll give you my take on this because I think there are some questionable things in here, and I'll tell you what I mean in a moment here. So essentially, for those of you who are just tuning in, the Liberals are coming out and saying, and if you've been here on the stream, you know this already, but the Liberals are saying the Conservatives, they're blocking Parliament. They're not allowing some important bills, in the Liberals' eyes, to pass through before the deadline of June 23rd, when the government officials will take the summer off, essentially. If things don't pass before then, well, they'd be restarted and re-debated back in September, or in the future in September, when Parliament is back in session after the summer. Now, the Liberals are saying, well, one of those bills that they want to pass is super important. That's Bill C30. It's the Budget Implementation Act. If you watch my videos, you've already heard about it. It's bringing in extensions to many benefits and supports, both for businesses and individuals. Liberals are saying, hey, this is going to expire like this month if we don't get this passed, so we need to pass it. But they're saying the Conservatives are using delay and stall tactics, and they're concerned that they're not going to be able to pass it before June 23rd. So the Liberals held this press conference to sort of go to the media to sort of pressure and add more pressure to the Conservatives, saying, hey, we want you to stop doing what you're doing to delay everything. Now, of course, I'm taking this from the middle. I'm giving you the Liberal perspective right now. Now, Conservatives, on the other hand, won't say that they're actually delaying this. There are many critiques of the Liberal government here as well, and there's a little bit of doublespeak where the Liberals are pointing out things that the Conservatives are doing when the Liberals have done similar things in different contexts. the Conservatives often would say, what are you talking about us not having enough time? It took you 2 years to bring in this budget in the first place. And if you really wanted these budget or the benefits like the CERS, the Emergency Rent Subsidy, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the Canada Recovery Hiring Program, many of the things inside of Bill C30, the Conservatives are saying, well, why would you stuff that inside of a 700-page budget bill to try to get passed when there's so much content to debate, instead of just making a smaller bill to pass to get the same supports extended, right? Conservatives are saying, well, you're trying to ram tons of stuff through here, not just the things that you say you're the most concerned about. So you can understand that there's a little bit of multiple sides to this whole situation. And the Conservatives will also point out that there's no plan for a proper and full reopening of the entire country in order to get people off of these supports and get people jobs. That's what the Conservatives would often say. And one other critique of the Liberals here is that the Liberals will say that we need to pass this and that Canadians still need support, but in the Finance Committee meetings where the NDP and the Bloc Québécois tried to fight to keep the supports at the same amount instead of lowering many of the supports, the Bloc Québécois and NDP were fighting for that. But the Liberals, through some political loopholes where they said they needed a royal recommendation, were able to rule that the amendments the Bloc Québécois and the NDP were trying to pass through in order to modify and change this budget to make it better in their eyes, while the Liberals were able to block that and rule that those amendments were not admissible. So there's lots of things going on here, and it's more complex than just what was said in this press conference, but a lot of interesting stuff here. Yeah, so I like to stay right down the middle on all this stuff. Let me know what you think of all this down in the comments. Leave a like on this video. It helps it get out to more people, and keep your eyes posted on this channel, because let me show you this. I often go to the Twitter for the House of Commons to see what's on the docket for today, and I'm going to keep you posted on all this, but let's give you some context on what's supposed to be done in the chamber today. This is in the chamber Twitter, where they sort of announced the daily schedule. Right here, as of 11, that's when the House of Commons opens up, which now it's 11:30. So they've begun this Bill C273. This is the Guaranteed Basic Income Act. They're going to go through a second reading for that. Not too important, I don't believe. Certainly, people are interested in the GBI, Guaranteed Basic Income, or UBI, but this doesn't actually implement anything. It's just a bill that's sort of saying, hey, maybe you should. If we pass this, it forces the finance minister to start to study how we could potentially one day implement it. So it's not actually much of a step forward in my eyes. But then they're supposed to, as of noon, start debating this Bill C30 budget. And then they're going to extend that after question period at 3 p.m. Oh, actually, there's something else here. But later on after government order. Oh, I thought that they were going to. Okay, so I guess they only have 2 hours here for C30. So what it seems like is going to happen, and this is what Pablo Rodriguez, the House leader from that press conference, and Christopher Freeland said, is that they're planning on putting forward a motion to called a time allocation, which will allow them to spend more of the day's time, or more of the days in the coming days' time, on Bill C30 and the other bills that they emphasize that they want to pass. Bill C30, C12, C10, C6. C30 is Budget Implementation Act. C12 is a climate change target bill. C10 is the regulation of online digital content. Lots of controversy there about freedom of speech and the fact that it's giving a lot of power to the CRTC, which many people aren't a fan of, as well as Bill C6, which is against conversion therapy. So they're trying to pass all of these before the deadline of next week, next Wednesday even. So it's going to be interesting to watch this go forward. Now, one thing that was interesting was one of the reporters' questions. Now, they asked, well, if you think that there's not going to be an election, which the Liberals have said they do not want, then the reporter said, why does it matter that we pass Bill C10, Bill C6, and Bill C12, these ones that aren't entirely time sensitive, much like C30, the benefits one, the one that's all about the Budget Implementation Act, that one is very time sensitive. The reporter asked, well, why are you not allocating all of your time to Bill C30 and just worrying about those other ones in September because they're not as time sensitive. They gave a little bit of a non-answer here. The only reason they would be concerned about this is if they think that an election is coming. If an election is coming, then it's likely that Parliament would be dissolved and all of the bills on the table would be essentially scrapped in order for the election to happen, and then it would restart once there's the new government formed. So it's a little bit, it looks a little bit like the Liberals are saying outwardly they don't want an election, but they're sort of positioning themselves to potentially call an election here very soon, and that's why they want to pass their bills before they have to restart if there is an election and a new government formed. So lots of interesting stuff here. We're gonna have to keep following it, and I'm going to cut this live stream off now here in just a few moments, but keep your eyes on this channel. If you haven't already done so, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'm gonna keep you updated, likely a couple videos today if anything major happens. I'm gonna put out a summary of what just happened here, so again, stay tuned, and thanks for supporting the channel. I appreciate all of you tuning in here. I hope this video has been helpful, and I hope this sort of content, trying to stay down the middle, is helpful for you. Feel free to share the stream, share my channel. I'm looking to grow a community here of a bunch of people who care about Canadian content on YouTube and this sort of stuff being covered. So I appreciate you all for being here. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one, everyone. See you later.